So morning all, it's now the following week, it's now the following Saturday. I had a ride out on the bike on Sunday afternoon. Very good, really enjoyed it. Went to Sheffield and came back. Went to visit a relative and then came back over, so that was really good. So what we're going to do next is I just thought we would have a quick look at the hub reduction assembly before we actually build it up, before it's covered up. So we've got the fixed gear here, which I have to move round to put that on. So this fixed gear obviously fits solid to the axle. The only moving part is that bearing. The purpose of this gear is to allow this roller set to roll round in it. So I'm going to have to be careful here because obviously it's got loose bearings on it, but I'll try and offer it up. So the roller set fits on like that, and make note of these square paddles, okay? And she rolls like that. I don't want to do it too much because I don't want to knock it all to bits, but she rolls like that. So obviously it needs something to drive it, and that something of course is this half shaft and the gear on it. So the power comes out the engine and the box into the worm drive, up the half shaft. Half shaft obviously comes out here. The idler gear, call it what you will, is, I'll look that up, is sandwiched in here between that gear and that gear. This acts as a track basically for the idler gear that's being driven by the half shaft. Those square pads locate in these holes here, okay? And those holes and these paddles drive the cap around, and the cap is obviously fitted to the hub with all these bolts. There's about a dozen bolts on there, and that is what transmits the power from the half shaft to the hub and obviously to the wheels. I hope all that makes sense. So this is called a hub reduction assembly. There are other words for it or other descriptions, but it's basically a hub reduction assembly. Now I've brought the tape measure. Traditionally you would expect to find a small gear and a larger gear and some idler gears, but ultimately the gears mesh and you can count the teeth and you can get to it. The Foden is slightly different in as much as there's no teeth to count. So we're going to go with, who's got the glasses? So what we're going to do is go with the size of the shaft. So the size of the shaft is 2.5 inch, and the most extreme part of that gear is about 7 inch. Bear with me, caller. So 7 divided by 2.5 is 2.8. So this reduction is 2.8 to 1 in my opinion. So if you know different, then you know, by all means. So the reduction is and the differential are designed to gear down the speed out of the gearbox to allow the torque to be transmitted through the wheels. It reduces torque on the half shafts and things like that, and it increases the longevity of the wear parts such as the gears and what have you by reducing the load on them. It does however rely on the gearbox being high geared in a high road gear. So that gearbox is an overdrive gearbox, and it is I think it's 0.77 to 1, isn't it, in overdrive? So if it was 1 to 1, you'd have 1 revolution of the engine, 1 revolution of the prop. So with the truck in overdrive, you would have 3/4 of a revolution of the engine for 1 revolution of the prop. That's right, isn't it? Because that's an overdrive. So if we said 1500 divided by 0.77 equals, so 1948. So that means Thought I got some chalk there. That means we've got an RPM increase on the back of the gearbox of 448 RPM. The diff will be 2.67. And what did we say that was? 2.8. Yeah. So it reduces, so it comes out the gearbox at 1948 RPM. If you think I've got this wrong, do tell me. And then it's geared down by divided by 2.67. So it comes out of the diff at 729 RPM, I think. So that half shaft is doing 729 RPM based on a 1500 RPM engine speed, and then that is divided by 2.8. So that means that if you divide it by 2.8, the hub at 1500 RPM is down to 260.5 RPM. Right, I don't really know how I've got down this rabbit hole, but I'm going to have to go now because we're going to have to talk about pi, aren't we? I know there's nobody watching, so we're going to have to talk about pi. So the wheel's 22.5, it's 1100 section tyre, and you have two of them, so we'll call it 45 inch and then pi. Right, I'll be back in a minute. Right, so I've been up into my office and I've dug out the build sheet, which is what this document is. And the reason I've done that is to get the final drive ratio, but I thought some of you may not have seen a build sheet, so we'd just whip through it really quickly. Obviously page number 1, chassis number 80418, which is obviously our chassis that we're working on. Customer name is Charnwood Trucks, so they obviously ordered the truck. Doesn't say who the final customer is. Obviously a building sheet, and then over this side here, which I'll show you in a minute, we've got a date of the 30th of April 1973. Here, this is the type number. So with the type number, you've got a series of letters that tell you what the vehicle is. So 0 denotes it's a right hand drive vehicle. 4 denotes it's got 4 wheels. A denotes it's articulated, or it's an Arctic tractor, call it what you will. The 32, that denotes gross vehicle weight, or in our case gross train weight. It would have been built for 32 tons back in the day, obviously not 38. C is for Cummins. C220 is for the engine, it's a 220 Cummins, and then that is 08, and that denotes the cab, which is obviously an S80. So if I just swing it over here a little bit, you can see you can see the build date that I was on about there. It talks about the wheelbase, which is 10'3", and obviously ours isn't 10'3" anymore, because earlier on we put a foot in the middle. It talks about the frame, and the section of it, Michelin tyres, and then down this section here it'll talk about, what mudguards it's having and what have you. But the bit we're interested in is here. Let's just try and so here we have the bit that we're actually interested in, which says worm gear, and if we move across to here, you can see that worm gear is 2.67. so the gearing on the final drive, the differential, call it what you will, is 2.67. If we just have a quick look at a couple of other documents, this is the Charnwood plating instructions, and again we've got an axle ratio here of 2.67 to 1. So this document is I suppose the final inspection sheet. We've got the customer name, which is Charnwood, the chassis number. All we've got for the engine is Cummins, gearbox type is an 8-speed, speedo cable lift put electric. Over here we've got the bit that we're interested in, which is the final drive 2.67, and above it you can see we've got the Cummins and the date. I suppose it was completed. It's probably the date it left the factory, that 20th of July 1973. Right, I've sort of gone down a bit of a rabbit hole here, but let's just recap quickly from what I said earlier on. You've got 1500 RPM coming out your engine. Obviously it'll go faster, but I said 1500. So 1500 divide by 0.77, which is the overdrive gear on that engine, gives us 1948 RPM out the gearbox. 1948 RPM overdrive. Yeah. So we now need to work out what the diff is, but we already know that because we saw it in the build sheet. So the diff is 2.67. So that first calculation is 1948 divided by 2.67. So if I go into here, and just divide that by 2.67, 729. Now that 729 is the speed of the half shaft when it leaves the diff. So 729.6 RPM. So that half shaft obviously goes into the hub. So we've got 729 RPM into the hub. 729 RPM into the hub. We then said it was 2.5 and 7, which came out at 2.8. Oh crikey. So 7 divided by 2.5 equals 2.8. So we've got a 2.8 to 1 ratio in that hub reduction. That's what we're guessing at. So 729.6 divided by 2.8 gives speed from the hub of 260 RPM. So we've got an engine speed of 1500 RPM. The overdrive gives us an output speed of 1948. It reduces the engine speed for the same road speed, but gives us that output speed increase on the gearbox. That's what the overdrive does. So we've got 1948 RPM going into the worm drive. We divide that by the worm drive reduction, which is 2.67, which gives us 729.6 RPM on the half shaft. The half shaft then goes into the hub reduction and is reduced to 2.8, and again you can see how much it scales it down, and that gives it an RPM of 260 RPM. And obviously it means that we're reducing the load, it increases pulling power when we're setting off, when we're trying to gain momentum, it's better for ground clearance, and it reduces load on the prop shaft and the half shafts and what have you. So what we need to do next is gear that up in terms of road speed, and to do that we've got 260 RPM. Let's move that out of the way in a minute. And then we've got a 22.5 inch rim, which is your wheel size, and then we've got two 11s, which is your tyre section size. So that's another 22, which means you've got 44.5. We then have to put some pie in, because you've always got to put some pie in. I hope you lot are remembering your college days here. And then you've got 60 minutes. Okay, so let's have a look at that sum. So 260 times 44.5, so that's your wheel size and your tyre section, times pi times 60 seconds in a minute. Yeah, so that should give us that 2,185. Okay, so what we need to do now with that number is we put it in here, 2,185, 686. We're now going to divide that by inches in a mile, which is 6,360. I can't deny I did have to look that up because it's been that long since we've done this, but anyway, so if we divide that by 6,360, that gives us 34.49 miles per hour. Okay, so at 1,500 revs this truck should do roughly 34.49 miles per hour. Now remember, these old trucks revved out to, you know, well over 2,000 RPM. I would say that 1,500 RPM is probably slightly less than 3/4 of the total revs of this engine. The total power output is probably on about 3/4 brake horsepower there. You know, it's a 220 engine, so it's going to be, I don't know, somewhere between 160 and 180 brake horse as a guess. And of course as well, if you remember, when you were rolling along one of these, it was in and out on the throttle. I'm probably going to put a section here to say skip past this if you don't want to do the maths, but that's where we're going for. So I think 34.49 RPM based on that reduction. If I'm wrong, put it in the comments. Right, okay, if you're still with me on this, then yeah, thanks, and I apologise. But anyway, I just needed to go through them numbers really for my own mind. So I think we've discussed this to death. Let's try and get it built. So the first job we're going to do is to tidy up these threads, and I've got an axle rethreading tool, so I'm just going to quick mess about and see if I can get the right thread pitch just to tidy those up. So that looks to be 10 threads per inch. I think it'll be on its limit with this axle. The secret with it is not to go too hard with it. It's looking pretty good, that now. Just going to give it a quick rub by hand. I like to do a quick rub just in my fingers with it, because you can really feel it then as you go through it, and just take out those last bits of swarf. It's got a little burr on the end I'm not happy with there. Lovely. Right, I'm going to make a brew, find the nut, and then we'll crack on again. Right, well, evening all. We got a bit distracted yesterday, because that is what I do. I've moved the Bonneville, the street twin. I did some work on it yesterday because it was nice in the afternoon. I put a set of bar risers on it. I took it out for a ride round, and I've parked it up in the other garage. I've also decided I'm going to sell that one because I can't seem to get on with it somehow. but I'm going to probably buy a T120 or a scrambler. Anyway, I've got the nut, the hub nut, and we cleaned the threads up, and that's going on and off there, absolute treat. So got the hub cleaned up, ready to go on. I've got that shoulder cleaned up, ready to go on. So let's get the hub on basically, and then we can get the drum on and get the wheels on, and oh yeah, brilliant. I'm just putting the faintest slither of grease on this shoulder because, you know, we obviously need the seals to really slide on and not tear and seal quite easily. Ta-da! Lift with your knees. So all this has been cleaned up, ready to go. Lovely. So this is the hub nut. It's a great example of why Foden went bankrupt. You can see here you've got all these cutouts, and in each of those cutouts you've got this threaded hole, and the idea is that you put a little block in there that interlocks with the axle, and you wind a bolt in and it locks it. So where everybody else were stamping out a washer with a keyway in it that went in the axle that you located into your adjustment nut, Foden's went the most expensive route possible. If you compare this to hub nut on the 4000, the 4000 hub nut's probably a quarter of the size, so a quarter of the material, and it's then got a dowel on it that you drop a ring onto, another washer, and then you have a lock nut that you run up to it. All of them would be less than the weight of this nut and about a third of the engineering. Oh, nearly dropped it. But that's our hub nut, lock nut and adjustment nut arrangement. I was going to make myself a fancy little spanner for this, but to be honest with you, I found on the other one it was that easy to adjust up. We're just going to do it with a bar and wind it on. I'm going to use the brass drift again. Great stuff, don't feel bad at all. So we've got this block in here which stops the nut turning, because it's got these cutaways in the axle end which act as a sprag. We've got this bolt, it's an Allen key head bolt, 10-30 seconds UNF bolt on a 5-30 seconds Allen key. I'm going to give it a dob of Loctite and get it fastened in. Traditionally, of course, this would be held in by punch marking. I don't really want to get into that, everything's getting a bit old and fragile now. Lovely. Right, so we've got this lock nut in. Next thing to attempt to get in is that planetary gear set, really, the idler gears. Not a particularly difficult thing to do, other than you've got to try and hold it all together and slide it all in. So let's see how we go on. There we go, a little bit fiddly, but easy enough when you get them going. Okay, that should be them seated. Look pretty good, that. You can see how they roll with the hub because they're running around that inner gear. Obviously when we put the cap on, that'll level things up somewhat. So next job is getting this half shaft in. I mean, incredibly heavy, you know, especially with a hub reduction axle, you think, Christ almighty, you know, but and there we go. Obviously that's slipping and spinning when it just slipped then because it hasn't got an end cap on. And it isn't going to get an end cap on tonight because I need to clean it. I'm going to probably clean these studs up and do the brake drum. So I'm just chasing out the holes for the drum retaining screws. They are essential on these because the drum retaining screws actually retain the drum. The wheels sit on this shoulder here, so if your wheel butts up to there and you've got that line there in between, then the wheels aren't retaining your drum. So really important to get these bolts cleaned up and in a really good place. I've just used a 3/8 BSP starter tap there. I'm going to follow it with this plug tap because it's slightly newer and a bit sharper, but they're a bit of a swine to start. Really worth putting the work in with them because you know, you've got a load of dirt and what have you there, plus they've been off for 2 years, you know, sat in the shed, probably got a little bit of surface rust in there, so you want them right. Friction is not your friend there at all. So we've got some brand new old stock bolts to go at. I'm just going to run all of them up before I put the drum on because you want them bang on. Right, well, as you can see, everything's had a right good slurming of grease. just because I want to get the drum out the way, I'm going to put the drum on first. Sometimes I put the cap on first, but on this occasion I'm going to put the drum on because I want the drum out the way. Everything's been chased through on the threads. The 3/8 BSP countersunk bolts, they'll go on grand for retaining the drum, and I've also cleaned up the 1/2 inch UNF on the holes for pulling the drum off. For some reason this side has been a bit tighter than the other side. I don't know why, but anyway. Right, so all them bolts have gone in really nice, but you've got to be conscious that you don't want them over tight. So that's all they need. They just need to sit there. You know, back in the day when I worked for Alf and we got that wire edge, you know, you used to dread it coming in if these bolts were tight, because you could never ever get them so that they undid. Didn't matter how much copper slip you put on them. And of course back then we were doing this with an Allen key, not really these fancy newfangled Allen key sockets, eh? Lovely. Guarantee when we come to do some maintenance on this in a few months time, or when we've ran it for a bit and all the rest of it, they will be as tight as you like, because you won't be able to get them out. It's like some sort of witchcraft. I just wanted to quickly show you this upgraded end cap. If you remember, our other side that we did in the last video had broken along here. Well, obviously these have got this extra reinforcing in that stops that, so I'm assuming this must be a later cap. Anyway, we'll get the seals on and get the RTV on and get it fitted. Right, so we've got the RTV and the seal in, and we've dropped it in place. For some reason everything on this side has been tighter than the other, so it's just been a case of tap it on nice and gently so we can get a nut on, and then we'll just wind it up on the nuts, but it's going okay. We can get a nut on that one. There we go. We'll get a nut on his mate now. This side. Again, all these studs have got oil and copper slip on them, and you know, we're obviously keen that they don't get seized. Nice bit of squeeze coming through there. Right, let's get all these others on. Lovely. Really pleased with that, that's gone up really nice. Right, one very last job is this bearing, which I'll bring you down here to see. Right, I'm going to work on the premise that most of you, if not all of you, spotted that on the end of the half shaft we've got a bearing. This nut here that I'm spinning with my fingers backs up to the bearing track in the end cap that the bearing on the half shaft runs in, and as you've probably guessed, the purpose of it is to manage the end float in the half shaft, thus managing the end float in the gears in the hub. So I am going to tweak it just to adjust it up for something like. So I've got this tool. I've been onto the Snap-on man about it, but apparently he doesn't stock them, so we've had to make one. Right, so I'm going to leave it at that. I think the adjustment will be okay. It's near enough for now. Like I say, we're going to revisit it. I just want to get the end cap on. So in the casting, there's this sprag that fits into the nut, and that locks the adjustment, so to speak. Again, not cleaned up the cap. It's not lined up for the oil level. It's just randomly put on because, as I've said, I just want to wrap this bit up, and then, you know, this is a little job for one of those evenings when we haven't got anything much to do. We can come down, clean these hubs up and make some gaskets. Perfect.